Good evening. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Boulder Valley Board of Education for Tuesday, October 22nd, 2019. Laura, would you please call the roll?
Benford. Board members, please remember to turn on your microphones. Fuqua.
Here.
Garcia.
Here.
Gebhardt.
Here.
Marquis.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
Sargent.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, wow, that was a pretty big change to have the flag over there. All right, so I would just like to remind everybody that the mission of the Boulder Valley School District is to create challenging, meaningful, and engaging learning opportunities so that all children thrive and are prepared for successful, civically engaged lives. Thank you all for being here this evening and joining us. And this evening we'll start, as always, with the superintendent's report. Dr. Anderson.
Board President Marquis, members of the board, thank you for being here this evening. Just two quick updates. I wanted to start by thanking the Lafayette City Council, who hosted me last night at their monthly City Council meeting and a workshop. We got to spend 45 minutes talking about my favorite topic, which is BVSD. It was really great to inform them on how we've restructured, reorganized our district to better support schools. They were very interested and thankful for the actions that we've taken. We're very thankful for the actions that you took on August 22nd around our harassment policies, and are very excited about the work that's happening in the district, and are actually very excited to be partnering with us as we think about focusing on the students in our schools in Lafayette. So that was wonderful. And then I would like to thank, so at 7 a.m. this morning in this very room, all of our grounds crew, maintenance staff, and center staff were here learning about how to be impressively responsive and develop great customer service to our district. And I just wanted to thank all of those team members for being here. As I've been doing my school visits and have been out in the community, I continue to remind people that talent is our strength in BVSD. We have incredible people. This morning was just another testament to that. So it was really great to be there with them this morning and give them a welcome. I didn't get here till 8. They were already working for an hour by the time I got here, just a testament to their work ethic. And so I want to thank Rob Price for his leadership in operations, and Molly McLaughlin, who was also here. It was just a wonderful morning. So that's all I have.
Okay, any questions for Rob? No? Yeah, Kathy.
So Rob, I think I've asked you this before, but in the past, the board has met with the city council from Lafayette, and I was thinking that as we go forward, to try to figure out if they don't have to be often, maybe a yearly meeting, electeds to electeds, would be a really nice idea to explore at least.
I absolutely agree. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us all to get together. We have, some of the very same vision and desires for our community. And so as we think about working towards next year and our calendaring, I'll work with Laura to see, and Randy to see what we can set up for everyone.
Okay, any other questions? No? All right, so our next item is public participation. The board recognizes the value of public comment on issues related to the operation of the schools. To ensure that our meeting is conducted in an orderly manner, we ask that persons who address the board, 1, confine your comments to matters that are germane to the business of the school district. Speakers on agenda items will be heard first, followed by those speaking to non-agenda items. Limit your presentation to 2 minutes. If we go over the first hour, public comment will continue at the end of the meeting. I don't see that being the case this evening. Recognize that students often attend or view our meetings. Speakers' remarks, therefore, should be suitable for an audience that includes kindergarten through 12th grade students. The board president may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement that is unrelated to the business of the district or inappropriate for pre-K through 12 students. So there is a timing system at Laura's desk, which is right there. She will begin the timer when your time begins. You will see the timer count down as you speak. Now, if you were given 2 minutes by someone else and you're having 4 minutes, it's going to go twice, because we haven't figured out how to do 3 and 4 yet. It's new. All right. You will see a yellow card when you have 30 seconds remaining. When you have 10 seconds, you will see the orange card. Please wrap up your comments so that the board can hear from the maximum number of speakers. All right, so we'll start with agenda items, and we'll begin with Sandy Hollander.
As we know it. Ted is not alone. Other visionaries are sounding the alarms. Jack Ma, the wealthiest man in China, founder of Alibaba, has also left his career to focus on the Chinese educational system. Boulder Valley is in need of an innovative high school. School districts all around our area and across the country are opening them. St. Vrain and Denver have them. We're falling behind. We are in a community that thrives and cultivates a creative, entrepreneurial, and forward-thinking mentality. We are the perfect environment to support an innovative school. I am hoping that we have a visionary board who can see the opportunities Sanitas would bring to our district, and not just the students who attend. I have visited schools that open their doors to other schools and share the progress programs that are taking place in their classrooms, an open source mentality. Sanitas Academy will offer students rigorous academics and collaborative opportunities in our community, all while focusing on the social emotional wellness of the students. As I'm sure you know, social and emotional wellness is a hot topic in our society. According to the Anxiety and Depression Association, 80% of kids with an anxiety disorder and 60% with depression are not getting treated. In a recent study, 10 years, where they studied 10 years of suicide rates among teenagers, 10 to 24 has increased, 55%. In the Rocky Mountain regions, it's increased 80%. Something is broken in our system, and some progressive schools across the country have discovered educational solutions to help. Sanitas has visited these schools and is planning on implementing some of their programs. Schools in our areas could see these techniques in action in their own backyard. I'm asking you to please continue to support Sanitas Academy toward a successful launch in the fall of 2020. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Ben Chong. And excuse me if I mispronounced the name.
No, you did fine. Okay, thank you. Well, good evening. My name is Bin Zhang. I am a proud parent of 2 BVSD students, one at Mara High School, one at Summit Middle School. And on behalf of all parents, I want to thank you for your service to the students and educators in the district. I support Sanitas Academy. I'm here to ask for your support as well. I have volunteered and interact with the students at Mara High School. I have felt that some of the students can be better served by fully participating and become stronger advocates for themselves in a small school setting. Science, technology, engineering, and math, those subjects are very important. I am an engineer by training. Having worked throughout my professional life, I felt we should start developing thought leaders, not simply taskmasters. I felt Sanitas Academy will give us a conduit to start developing the thought leaders from early age on. Effective innovation is a function of experimenting with new ideas. I think we should give Sanitas Academy the opportunity to become the incubator of ideas and concepts. So I am here to ask for your help. Let's enable the capable team at Sanitas Academy the opportunity to start the journey. Let's support them, ask them that they aim high, never settle for just good enough. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Scott Collins.
Thank you. Good evening, Superintendent Anderson and BVSD board members. My name is Scott Collins. I'm a parent of 3 kids. I've lived here for 25 years in Boulder. I am a co-founder and CTO of a software company here in Boulder as well. I'm here to voice my strong support for Sanitas Academy and sort of talk about the virtues of experiential education from 2 perspectives. One as a father, and second as an industry leader. We've formed a funded partnership with the St. Vrain Valley School District Innovation Center, which allows high school students from the district to work for my company as software engineering interns while they receive high school credit. So the idea basically is they come and do this applied work, a job that is usually offered to college graduates they're doing in high school. My observations with my own children are anecdotal, but they do seem to match the conclusions from a number of research studies, peer-reviewed journal articles that compare experiential learning methods vis-a-vis traditional classroom methods. While my kids are willing to perform academically in a classroom environment, they're only truly passionate about an activity to the degree that they perceive that it is authentic and that they have real power to affect the outcome. In 3rd grade, my youngest built an ECG from electronic parts that she ordered online to measure a dog's heart signals to compare it to her own because she loves dogs and wants to become a vet. In 5th grade, my middle daughter performed an experiment with plant cultivars using complementary plant hormones because she wants to become a biotech researcher to help people. In 5th grade, my son created a series of natural water filtration methods that could be extended to the developing world using readily available natural materials. Nearly all the requisite knowledge that stood in their way of their goals was mastered because there was an authentic purpose to the work. My observations with our decade-long internship program with CU students, many of whom we have hired, and our new partnership with SVVSD Innovation Center indicates the same phenomena. Students are willing to push themselves to learn difficult material when they're passionate about what they're doing. It seems that the Sanitas Academy team and the many parents and students that support this initiative understand why this is so important. To this end, I would like to voice my strong support for the educational platform being framed at Sanitas Academy and would encourage the board to support these efforts wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Ross Weiner.
Hello, good evening, Superintendent Anderson and BVSD board members. My name is Ross Weiner, and I'm the founder of 2 educational organizations that work with schools around the nation. One of these is Teach United, a nonprofit that serves rural schools here in Colorado. I'm also a board member of Summit Middle School and part of the team to launch Sanitas Academy. I want to talk about our commitment to diversity. At Summit and at Sanitas Academy, we want to mirror the district averages of ELL, SPED, and FRL students, not only because it's the morally right thing to do, not only because we think it's possible to build both a diverse and achieving school, but because we know that the type of learning that we want to create cannot happen without a diverse learning environment. Numerous studies have shown that diverse by design schools help students succeed academically, build relationships, and thrive. I visit dozens of schools in urban markets around the nation, and I wish this type of school existed here in BVSD. So here's how I think about this as a person whose work is about helping schools discover purpose in learning. School in the future is not only going to be about what we know, it's going to also be about who I am and how I connect to the world. And when a student is in a population of mainly students that look just like they are, they have a harder time developing a sense of identity. Identity doesn't necessarily, is not the same thing as purpose, but they correlate very, very highly. So diverse communities that have diverse racial, ethnic, all kinds of diverse help students feel safe, drop into meaningful, purpose-driven learning, and that's exactly the type of learning that we want to create at Sanitas Academy. We have an incredible team, an exciting vision. We have the ability to bring in lots of money, both from the state and even from philanthropic dollars to make this happen. And really what we need to launch this diverse school is support on the facilities front. I hope you can help us. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Jill Oliver.
Feels like the price is right.
Thank you for hearing us all tonight. I know you've been here for a long time, many hours today. My name's Jill Oliver. I have a son, a sixth grader at Summit Middle School. And I didn't know about Summit Middle School until I was working with a counselor because my son thrives in smaller groups. He kind of lost himself at his big elementary school. He was bullied for being different. He's a little quirky, these are words that he's telling me that he's been called. And so someone says, you got to check out Summit. And we did, and he is now a sixth grader there. And for a little boy who came home from school crying, I'm not kidding, almost daily in his elementary life. Granted, he was a good student, but he just couldn't meet friends and people were mean to him. And my wife and I had him in counseling because we thought there's something wrong with us. And after his first day at Summit Middle School, he came running out and said, I've met so many new friends. This little boy asked me to play Dungeons and Dragons, and I don't know what that is, but I'm gonna go. We watched a little boy crying, lonely. He told me in kindergarten, we were tucking him in, he said, Mama, I know I'm different, and I know I'm not liked at school. And I know I'm different. And so my heart has broke on a daily basis for many years, and now he's at Summit, and I see that a smaller atmosphere, he is thriving. And I was on the equity committee at Summit, and not only did we bring in FRL families, but we developed a team inside Summit with the equity team, a support team that works with the children when they come into the school. We work with housing helpers. I Have a Dream. We've partnered with everybody we can because we weren't allowed to go into other schools in the district. We worked with People's Clinic. We put flyers up. We want a diverse school. We just ask that you help us in our efforts. We want that, and I thank you so much for your time, and I couldn't be happier with Adam and all the work that the staff has done there.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to our non-agenda items. And we'll start with Lena Shi, who's been given 4 minutes from Theodore Chen.
Dear BVSD board members, thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. I have lived in Boulder for over 20 years. I came to Colorado from China with my parents when I was 17 years old. I was on free reduced lunch while finishing last year of high school. My husband is a second-generation Taiwanese who grew up in Boulder. We both went to CU and made a good life for ourselves in this wonderful city. His parents came to this country in the 60s and were eager for the family to assimilate, so never learned Chinese. After our kids were born, we were determined that they will learn to speak, read, and write in Chinese, for we know the beauty and the depth of this ancient and ever-changing language. And it's the key to understand our people, our history, and our culture. Chinese is not offered at BVSD. So we send our kids to Bohua Chinese School on weekends. Bohua is a nonprofit school organized by parents. We serve many non-Chinese families in the community who wish to learn Chinese. We're grateful that BVSD has been a longtime partner of Bohua by letting us rent your facilities. BVSD has also been graciously offering AP Chinese tests to our students for over a decade. And right before this afternoon, we learned that this year BVSD is no longer offering the AP Chinese test. And the deadline for the registration has been moved up to the end of this month. So 9 days away from the deadline, our 18 students still don't know where to register. This is disheartening because these young people have worked hard for the last 10 years to get where they are today. They went to school 6 days a week since they were 5 years old. They work on their Chinese homework on top of full load of regular schoolwork. Some think that it's easy to learn a second language when your parents are native speakers. It is not, especially not so for Chinese. It is a very difficult language to learn, even for kids living in China. Without the environment, our kids struggled and felt discouraged. And as parents, we thought about giving up many times. If you ask any of them, they will tell you that they hated Chinese school. But nonetheless, they persevered. It is the students themselves who want to end their Chinese school journey with the AP exam. It is not just about college credits. It's about validation of years of hard work and proof of college level proficiency. We feel the district should support these motivated students in their pursuit of learning a language that connects them with their heritage and allows them to be ambassadors of Eastern and Western cultures. We believe that BVSD wants to be an inclusive community that values cultural diversity. And here this afternoon we got a good news that there's movement on that, and so we want to make sure that it will be followed through because we don't have a lot of time left. And I also would very much like to see BVSD offer Chinese maybe starting in middle school. I know BVSD had tried in high school. It is a difficult language to learn, and it's not fair to start Chinese in 9th grade. So if you will consider starting offering in middle school, I think many students will benefit from that. And I hope that we don't have to go through this year after year, because I know one of our parents were here last year, and this year we had to struggle to get this secured again. And so I thank you very much for listening. And lastly, my daughter is also at Summit Middle School, and I want to also express my support for Sanitas Academy, because I do believe we lived in China for 2 years. I think around the world, people are looking for new ways, innovative ways to educate our children. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Yan Fun Gao, who is given 2 minutes from Li Feng.
Good evening. Many parents have the opinion that BVSD should have the capability to teach Chinese language, just as she mentioned. And I'm just one of them. The most spoken language in the world is Chinese. China is the biggest trade partner of US. And also an emerging power that could challenge the leading position of US. Teaching Chinese could help our children to compete, cooperate, and doing better business with China. So our neighboring school district, such as SVVD, the same county, they can offer the Chinese language class and offer AP test. So most of people consider BVSD is the best school district. And I just don't understand why we don't have the capability to offer course, Chinese course. Without course offering, okay, many students seek alternatives. And both our Chinese school in Boulder can fill in the gap. We have 18 students. Among them, 10 of them is Fairview students. They have studied language for 10 years. It's very unfair for them to not get any credit for this. How many 10 years we have in one's whole lifetime? The argument from Fairview was that Fairview does not offer exam for courses that we do not come to teach. This was simply not true. They have tested for the last years. And it was also stated on Fairview website. So BVSD actually provided Chinese AP tests for many years, and there are many students take this every year. The problem emerged just from last year. I do not understand why. I would also like to ask why Fairview could not teach the most spoken language in the world. It should be offered even from middle school, as just Nina said. I believe if a language course was offered from the middle school, then there will be more students have interest and would be easier to offer a course in high school. One student told me that the Chinese language was still on the AP test list on Fairview website. It's just a couple of weeks ago. And it suddenly disappeared when we tried to register. And the deadline is this month, the end of this month. So we tried very hard and tried many possible alternatives. However, BVS students have trouble to register tests in other districts, SVVD in Norman. This simply does not allow. Last year, some students contacted Cherry Creek High. They registered, paid money, and it got canceled. So this year, we contacted them. Even we didn't get a response. We also tried contact Dawson, the private school in Boulder. No response. We are frustrated. We are embarrassed by this situation. We need your help, my dear members. Last year, similar thing happened. I stand in front of you, same thing. You hear, you listened, you helped. This was administrated, but I was very sad that this happened again this year. So I really appreciate the help of last year, but this year I again need your help. So last year I spoke for the other students, for the community. But this year, however, I also need to speak for my son because he is going to take the AP test this year. So I sincerely hope that you can help again this year. I hope this will not happen again next year. I don't want to come back again this next year. Seriously. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Keisha Wei. And again, I apologize if I mispronounced that.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Keisha Wei. I would really appreciate this opportunity to speak in front of everybody. I have a son. His name is Kevin Huang at the Fairview High School. So far, he loves his school from every aspect, except for this disappointing point, and he couldn't register his AP test. I come here this evening to support my fellow parents, and my husband is here. His name is Xing Hui, is among the audience. I was thinking, Boulder is such an area with so much diversity, among which Chinese community is an important part of it. We would like to see this AP test showing up in the system every year, regardless the school doesn't teach the Chinese class or not, something like that. So we just simply don't want to do this kind of protest every year. We would like to, just you and Fang said, we feel embarrassed by ourselves. Okay. So on an annual basis, we have an average of 15 to 20 Chinese students. We would like to take the AP test. So we would like to have this on an ongoing basis, showing up in the BVSD AP test system. So your consideration is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much.
Okay. And our next speaker is Xin Zhang.
Okay, so good evening. So my name is Xin Zhang, and I don't prepare anything. So I'm here. So the three speakers, they already said enough for us. So my daughter, she took the AP exam last year. I remember that's in the very early morning. We have to drive to Denver, South Denver, to take the test. So this year, my son is going to take the test. So anyway, so as a first-generation immigrant, we know the second language is very important. So I hope our kids, they can keep a second language. I know their English is right now is their first language. I hope they can keep the Chinese as their second language. Anyway, so really appreciate if the board can consider this request. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, our next speaker is, so this one's tricky, Yangshen Jiang.
Good evening, superintendents and also the board members. I'm here to voice my concern for my son not be able to take the AP Chinese test in Fairview this year. So he's a little bit disappointed, and I'm very concerned. I still remember the first time I sent him to the Chinese school. He was so excited because many of his friends speak Chinese. But as time goes on, he developed some resistance to learning Chinese because his many friends at school speak English. But of course, every time we brought him to China, we put him in his cousin's home. Within 1 or 2 weeks, he speaks very nice Chinese. So, and then we took bus, took a train, took airplane. He looked at those words and figure out those Chinese words. Said, "Wow, that's nice." He said, "Learning Chinese is not so bad at all." So, he has learned Chinese for almost, I think, 8 years already. And I think he's ready to take AP Chinese test because I think he's ready. But then we learned that Fairview cannot offer AP Chinese test, nor any BVSD school in here offer any AP Chinese test. So he's not very happy, and I was really concerned. I talked to many parents whose kids were learning Chinese, and then they were very concerned too. So I think because there are so many Chinese families, they have sent their children to Chinese school in Chinese. I think it's important for them to take the AP Chinese test and test their ability and also increase their curiosity. So I really hope the BVSD consider this opportunity of offering AP Chinese test either in Fairview or wherever, but please let the children take the AP Chinese test. Thank you very much.
Okay. So our next item on the agenda is board communication. Who would like to start? Richard?
Well, I want to thank all of the Sanitas Academy parents for being here tonight. And I also want to thank the folks that came in to talk about the AP Chinese test. Thank you very much. One announcement that I do have is this Saturday at Manhattan School of the Arts, the Dream Big group is offering again the Cúspide, which is the Latino Parents Summit. And you're all invited to attend. I think our superintendent is going to be one of our speakers there at that Cúspide. There's a difference between Cúspide and Cumbres, because you do have Cumbres for las mujeres in Boulder Valley. And we didn't want to call it Cumbres because there's already a Cumbres name. And Cúspide is really the peak, the real top of the mountain, okay? So, and there's a little spirit behind that, and that is that if once you reach that peak, the journey is to make sure you get to the peak, like climbing a 14er here, you climb up there and you get all energized again. Well, that's the goal of this particular Latino summit, so you're all invited to come.
What time did you say again?
It starts
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock. Thank you.
And is this similar to the one last year?
Yeah.
It's, okay, good.
Yeah,
I know
it's at Manhattan School of the Arts.
Yeah, it's the same place, right?
Right,
Okay.
same place.
Awesome.
And they're expecting a large crowd this time also. I just have a couple of questions regarding some of the comments tonight. Like, what does it cost to do an AP test in I was just looking, it seemed like it's what, about $93 a test or something like that?
So if it's okay with the board, I'm going to ask Dr. Crespo to come up and address the issue that several
Thank
of our
you.
parents spoke to this evening because we feel like that we've come to a resolution to solve this issue. So
Thank you, Rob.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board. We are very excited to be able to offer the AP exam, the Chinese AP exam this year. We did have a little bit of a hiccup, very honestly. The AP organization, Advanced Placement Organization, is a little slow to respond to us. And when it comes to specific language programs, We need desktop computers, and they have to load certain software every year, and we're really at the mercy of when they contact us based on our location. So we were able to connect. We have a counselor who is now registering the students with information. We are still waiting for Advanced Placement to contact us back, but we're testing the computers at Monarch High School to make sure that they're effective for our needs, and we've got IT working on it and systems in place. The goal was that this year the exam would be online. AP has not moved to do that. So that's kind of totally our issue, has nothing to do with the families. We appreciate you coming and continuing to support for your students, and it won't happen again. This has been going on for weeks and weeks. It's just essentially our fault for not communicating to families to say, we are working on it, this is what we're doing, and we're headed forward. We certainly don't want you to have to be here to ask for this. This is something that's really important for us and for your children. So, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Richard, did you have other questions?
Yeah, the question about Chinese classes, did we have those before? I can't. We did have them, right? Because I remember that there were a couple of friends of mine that were really advocating for at least Mandarin classes to be implemented in the school system. We don't have those anymore?
No, so we have offered Chinese in the past, Mandarin in the past. It's very hard to keep a teacher, frankly, across the country. That it seems to be an issue. There's a lot of turnover, and then there's a lack of consistency in programming. However, one of the things that we were just briefly talking about was how do we engage with our partners who are our students who are already taking those classes on the weekends? How do we help them through that process? We have lots of options, and I think that as we were just chatting back there, how do we get to the next level around supporting our students who are taking Chinese Saturdays, after school, whenever that might be. So we'll be investigating some of that with our instructional practices team, and we'll definitely connect with the families and see what are the next steps available. Because that's why we can't offer the class. You have to have the certain number of students, and you also have to have a teacher. Yeah. And it's very hard to do that.
I'm thinking out loud here, but I think I seem to recall that some time ago we used to be able to offer letters of authorization for subject areas that were hard to recruit. So, for example, Chinese, Mandarin, or and it seemed like we have a lot of people in the community that could teach that class.
So, speaking from experience as a principal who at one point was very excited to offer Mandarin Chinese, the issue becomes depending upon the interest depends upon whether or not you have 150 students that want to take Chinese or not. So if you only have 40, then that's a 0.4, so it's not even a full-time job, right? Unless you have, you're lucky enough to find somebody who's dual certified that could teach Chinese and then another subject that the school needed. So I do think there's certification issues. I think that we can investigate kind of where that happened. You know, certainly partnering with our parents. We want to make sure that we're supporting our kids. But there are some nuanced challenges, especially when you're looking at specialized programs like this.
I will also add that we offer some of these courses online, Chinese and Japanese, and frankly, it's very difficult to learn a world language online. So some students find it success and others don't. Thank you.
Kitty?
Well, first, I want to say thank you and xie to the parents who came and spoke to us about Chinese as well as about sanitas. But that's not what I want to talk about right now. I went to the CASB delegate assembly, and we had a record number of resolutions, 50 of them, as you all know, because you went through them. So most of them passed. I wanted to get a complete list of those that didn't, but I wasn't in the room the entire time because I had to go check out. But the ones I can tell you for sure that did not pass, funding for gifted and talented students. And I think the concern about that was earmarking money as opposed to just allowing districts to spend the money the way they saw fit. Where's the next one? Some were removed because they were redundant. One that had a lot of vigorous debate was about local control. And it it was adopted even though it was redundant with a standing resolution about local control. But this came forth from a lot of school districts. Well, it came forth from one, but a lot of school districts were concerned about the new legislation on sex education and adding they feel like that's taking away local control. And so that did pass. Yeah, another one on education funding was redundant. Special ed funding from marijuana retail sales did not pass. And I think a lot of that had to do with, do we want to be depending on marijuana sales in order to fund education? And a lot of people thought that they did not. And if you remember something I don't remember, Kathy, jump in. Yeah, some other redundant ones. It's not on the CASB website yet, so it's, oh, it is now? Okay. Well, what do you see that do you have it up? Oh, okay. They did pass our resolution on vaping. That seems to be a big concern across the state. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Tell me what I didn't say, Kathy.
Can I ask a question? How many school districts were represented?
78
So
Out of 176?
out of 178.
So 100 were not.
I know that because I had to keep track. What I will say about the resolutions, and then I'll turn it back to Kitty, is all our resolutions passed, including Donna's on CTE. So everything that we brought forward on charter schools and on CTE and on vaping, every one of them passed. And as Kitty said, the Lewis Palmer resolution on local control kind of devolved into a conversation around LGBTQ and sex ed, and it was probably the liveliest debate with the division in the state between kind of El Paso County strenuously wanting that resolution and kind of the rest of the state feeling like it was already covered. So, and there was some good conversation around the charter school resolutions, some concern about how far the change in the standard of review would go. Would it affect charters that were, there's some charters in District 49, which is Falcon, that are state charters, and what impact would it have on that? So I always love the conversation. We did have one overachiever who got up and talked about 31 of the resolutions, but I always enjoy that because there's people who just love the policy and keeps the conversation going. And I have to say at the end, it made me laugh because on the very last resolution, he put his rally cap on. So we all knew it was over. So it was, we got it done and we were out of there by 1:05. So.
Yeah, so only an hour over. One thing I did want to bring up is one of the resolutions that passed was wanting charter schools, instead of getting the mill levies from, or state CSI charter schools, instead of getting mill levies from the districts from which their students come, was to ask them to go through the Tabor process of asking the state for a mill levy in order to fund charter schools. I don't see that really passing and coming up in this legislature, but it might.
Anything else? That's it. Donna?
Thank you to the Sanitas group that came out to inform us even more about your school and where you're going. My own sons would have benefited all three of them are engineers now, went through our Boulder Valley system, but academics was only important to them if they saw a purpose behind it. So one of my sons worked for one of the hardware stores and counted screws until he couldn't stand it anymore and said, I'm out of here, I'm going to be an engineer. So experience out in the world is important. It tells you what you're going to do and what you're interested in. One of them built a Rubin tube, and for those of you that know, I didn't know what it was, but now I know. And the sound wave project was so important to him. So I am in support of you moving forward with this, and I think smaller high schools are very important for our kids. I went to a high school that graduated 1,000 in my day, and I always teased my husband because he was valedictorian of only 200, but I was in the top quarter of 1,000. So I always tell him, so yeah, the size makes a difference. Anyway, also to our Chinese parents, thank you so much for coming out. I wish I spoke Chinese. My husband went to China on business several times and had to have everything written on a note card so he could show everybody what. And it's one of our business languages that help people succeed. So I thank you for coming out on that. Let's see. So as a representative on the board, as a treasurer, we had a meeting today with our audit committee, and BVSD is in great standing. Thank you, Bill Sutter and Justin and Shelley and Bob Smart, our community liaison. The guy knows his stuff. But we have surplus, and so we can't afford a Chinese teacher. But it's better to have money that you can spend instead of trying to cut places. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay. Kathy, did you want to finish up? Okay.
I'll just say thank you, parents, on both topics. We always appreciate hearing from every voice in the district. I just want to say a quick thanks to Principal Stephanie Jackman at Lafayette Elementary, who hosted Kitty and Kathy and Rob and I this morning for a really wonderful tour of that thriving neighborhood school. We saw how the bond work has improved conditions, opened it up, lots of light, great playgrounds, secure vestibule. That was all wonderful to see. We heard some about their talented and gifted programs. I loved that we walked into a teacher's classroom, I think it was Ms. Covington, although I might be wrong, and she just voluntarily started talking about the mindset and mindfulness work she does at the start of the day to settle the kids. I think that work is so important, and it was wonderful to hear a teacher just talking about it unprompted. So I love that that's happening in our elementary schools. So thanks to Principal Jackman, who's got a great team there at Lafayette.
Shelley?
Yeah, I just want to thank the parents too, both from Sanitas Academy and to our Chinese parents. My kids also went to Summit, and they had a wonderful experience there, and I think it's just great that the Sanitas crew wants to extend that experience to high schoolers, and I hope that can get accomplished somehow. And to our Chinese parents, I just wanted to ask Margaret, again from Crespo, you can probably stay there, it's just a quick question. When you said that it won't happen again, do you mean that we're now set up to continually give that AP test year after year, or?
Actually, we will always give that assessment as long as our kids are interested.
Okay, so it won't be like this again. Okay, thanks.
Kathy?
Similar to my fellow board members, thank you everyone for coming and sharing your concerns and your experiences with the district, and thank you to staff for so quickly resolving the AP issue. I think there's a short timeline, I know, because my daughter's signing up for all her AP tests right now, and they changed the deadline. There used to be an alternative deadline that you could sign up in the spring, so time was of the essence. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, and thank you for resolving that. My daughter was in the first class of Summit, and I've seen it grow and flourish, and so it's pretty exciting, and thank you for the parents for coming and sharing their hopes and dreams for their students. As far as the Lafayette Elementary School, one of the things too, Sam, that I really enjoyed learning about today was the partnership with Angevine that they have for their math track, so that students have a way to not only accelerate in that area, but also experience what middle school might be like, and that might help some of them with those transitions. So it was a great time to go and actually experience the school. I had I don't know if you'd call it the pleasure, or I don't know, maybe pleasure of listening to the interim committee the last couple of days on school finance. And today was the day that they were supposed to come up with their bills. I'd say they probably spent 2/3 of the time trying to figure out the process for doing that, which I get. Do we have one bill? Do we have 10 bills? Do we have 6 bills? What do we do? What do we call it? We can't call it pre-K-12 because we don't do pre-K, but then we do pre-K, so it's entertaining to listen to say the least. And the best I can tell, that obviously they're a little split. They want to figure, they have this tool that's only available to the members of the interim committee that a group called EdBuild put together, where you can go in with our current formula and play with it to figure out where you might find money. And the biggest factor in the formula is what's called cost of living. I don't know, Bill, how much we get, but it's a significant contribution to Boulder. And what they're looking at is if we don't do cost of living, that frees up somewhere between $300 and $1 billion that we could then reallocate. I think that's kind of a scary argument. There was also a lot of conversation around mill levy equalization and what does that look like, and can we find some money in mill levy equalization. The one common theme that I thought was encouraging was they want to make sure that any changes they do have hold harmless, at least hold harmless for a short period of time, so that you're not just taking money from one district to another. But I caution us as we set our budget going forward, both because we're in either a flat or declining enrollment, and also because I think the state is looking to actually finally do something on school finance. I wouldn't say we're going to be immune from any changes, so I just think we have to keep our eye on that really carefully. So I just say that as a word of caution. They ended up with 2 bills. I'm not sure how they're going to do this. December 16th is the next time they're meeting, which is the same time the Joint Budget Committee's meeting. But they were going to meet then to actually look at bill drafts. So I think we should have something from our lobbyists before then.
Thank you, Kathy. I think we do need to really keep an eye on that. That will be affecting all of us, and especially our neighbors also have lower enrollment than expected. If you saw an article on St. Vrain's enrollment this morning, that was interesting too. So, and for the 7th time, thank you all for coming and advocating for your students. We appreciate all the parent input. And for the item on Summit, we'll be talking about that later on in the agenda. Okay, so then our next item is an information item, 6.1. It's the dyslexia pilot.
Good evening, President Marquis, members of the board, Dr. Anderson, Margaret Crespo, Area Superintendent for the Southwest Network. Super excited to be here tonight to share information related to our dyslexia pilot, dyslexia screener pilot. I'd like to introduce Michelle Kazi. She is an outstanding member of the Southwest Network, as well as our newly hired reading director. A little bit about Michelle, because we're so excited to have her on board. Michelle taught for 16 years, realized that she had a passion around students and making sure that they were having every opportunity to read and learn, and she followed that pursuit over her entire career. She studied for 4 years under Dr. Lynn Fitzhugh, who's a dyslexia expert, has multiple areas of certification in the area of dyslexia. She is an academic language therapist, qualified instructor of academic language therapists, president of the Academic Language Therapy Association, the Rocky Mountain chapter. She's VP of Programs for National Academic Language Therapy Association and the conference chair. She exhibits as a chair for National Academic Language Therapy Association, worked at Children's Hospital in Colorado for 5 years, managing learning services, which provided learning disability evaluations and dyslexia therapy. We are very lucky to have her on board, and it has been an incredible journey so far. And I'd just like to introduce her so she can share with you where we are on our screener pilot.
Good evening, President Marquis and board members. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you tonight about dyslexia, which truly has been my life's work. So what is dyslexia? It's a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin, so that means it's genetic. It's characterized by difficulties with accurate and/or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities, so cracking the code of the English language in print. These difficulties typically result from a deficit in the phonological component of language that is often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities and the provision of effective classroom instruction. In BVSD, parents concerned with dyslexia began partnering with the district to address concerns related to their child's reading. The Dyslexia Advisory Team was formed in the spring of 2017 and is made up of parents, teachers, administrators, and dyslexia experts. This got the conversation started as we began looking at practices to address the reading struggles of students. This year, Colorado lawmakers also formed a working group to study dyslexia practices statewide and offer solutions. A dyslexia screener is likely to come out of this work. Why do we need a screener? A lot of us have seen that number, 1 in 5. 1 in 5 students struggle to learn to read. About 12 to 20% of students, and actually people in the world, have the characteristics of dyslexia. Right now, there's already really great work going on in the area of dyslexia remediation here at Boulder Valley School District. We give interim assessments that inform us on strengths and areas of concerns in the area of reading. This tells us what interventions students need, if any. All kindergarten through first grade students get explicit, systematic, multisensory teaching with the rollout of foundations in these grade levels. This is instruction that we know works specifically for students with dyslexia. This rollout will include second grade next year, so I'm really excited about that. If students still struggle, even though they are getting this universal instruction, then they receive Orton-Gillingham-based interventions. This is also true for students beyond the second grade. So this year, I've been a little bit busy just studying a few states who already do a screener. There's not a lot of them. And so I engaged the parent group that we've been working with to get the history of the screener conversation. Earlier this month, I also spoke with principals at a PK-12 principal meeting just to engage them in the conversation as well as get their interest and solidify the schools that will be in the pilot. Throughout the rest of this year, I would like to begin piloting a dyslexia screener and then evaluate whether it worked or not, right? Or just what changes we can make. So if we have a screener, what needs to be in the screener? There's 5 essential components when you're looking at a student who may have the characteristics of dyslexia. Difficulty identifying the separate speech sounds within a spoken word or phonemic awareness. Identifying letter names, which is actually the biggest indicator of later reading difficulty, whether a child has been exposed to letters or not. Letter sound correspondence, spelling, whether it's poor or it's intact, and then rapid naming. And rapid naming is basically where students are shown a matrix of 5 to 10 different colors or objects or numbers or letters. They then are timed as they state all of these objects, colors, numbers, or letters. When we look at colors and objects, it shows us their general processing speed. When they look at letters and numbers, they're looking specifically at their alphanumeric processing speed. Why is this important, this rapid naming? Because many students with dyslexia also suffer from what they call the double deficit theory, which is they also struggle with working memory and processing. So my recommendations for a pilot are to model the work of Mississippi and go ahead and engage the Mississippi Dyslexia Screener. It hits all of those components that I just spoke about. It also is free of charge to use. It's online right now. Anybody can access it. It takes about 15 minutes and is given one-on-one. It is done with paper, but it gives you immediate results because the teacher who is Giving the screener will then input the results immediately, and it spits out these phenomenal reports that are easy to understand by educators as well as teachers. I'm sorry, educators as well as parents. So, states who already do a screener either administer it at the beginning of kindergarten or at the end of kindergarten. Both of these approaches have their pros and cons. Based on previous experience with screeners, I would recommend the two-tiered approach or dynamic screening. The company that created the Mississippi screener created a dynamic screener as well that is much less intensive than 15 minutes one-on-one. It identifies those who do not show the neurological processes needed to easily learn to read are intact. This could be given the spring of kindergarten to identify those needing the full-blown screener at the beginning of first grade. When we're looking at schools that we would want to participate in the pilot, I would recommend about 10 to 15 schools for the pilot. This will give us a good representation of all geographic areas as well as all demographics areas. So dyslexia does not discriminate. It doesn't discriminate over socioeconomic levels, and it doesn't discriminate against a variety of different languages. When I spoke to the principals, we then engaged them to ask if they would be interested in the pilot and any questions they had. 8 elementary schools have already indicated they would like to be part of the pilot, and we are getting more interest each and every day. The key things they would like us to consider is the time that it takes to administer the assessment and its impact on teachers and instruction. They also are concerned with the impact on intervention services once we start to identify these students. Once we go ahead and start on the pilot and finish, part of that process is to then conduct an internal evaluation that would engage student assessment as well as the program evaluation department. I would like to say also that a screener does not diagnose. It is simply a screener. It alerts parents and teachers to look deeper into why a student is not reading and spelling as efficiently as their peers. It also lets us know that we have to watch those students and make sure that they are getting the direct, explicit, systematic, multisensory instruction that breaks down the structure of the English language, because that's what works for them. Thank you for your time and attention. I welcome questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Any questions? Shelley?
First of all, I am so happy you're here. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the work that you're doing. This district has needed someone who's really focused on this for quite a while, so thank you. I do have a couple questions. For a long time, we've talked about the screener and when we should do it, what was involved, how we should do it. And I'm just wondering why we wouldn't just do it with kindergartners right away instead of waiting till first grade. If it's 15 minutes and it's online, or I mean, it's paper and pencil and easy to do, isn't there some benefit in identifying those kids as soon as possible?
So there is some benefit in identifying kids as soon as possible. However, we also want to consider what makes sense for that. I was a kindergarten teacher for a few years, and I have to say, knowing those students who come in that first week, I cannot imagine giving them an assessment such as this within that first week. Yes, we want to intervene as early as possible, and yes, we want to know those students, but I don't think it's prudent to do it in the very early stages of kindergarten.
Not even towards the end of the year?
I'm sorry?
Not even towards the end of the year?
Yes, I would say you could do it at the end of the year, and that's what I am suggesting as far as doing that initial screener, the dynamic screener, to all kindergarten students towards the end of the year, and then following up for those kids who showed a concern at the beginning of first grade.
And how long does it take to administer the dynamic screening that you do in kindergarten?
So the interesting aspect of the dynamic screener, it will take a little bit longer, but it's not as intensive because it doesn't have to be done one-on-one. It can be given to small groups of students all at the same time.
And we're doing this in a pilot form because of resources, or what would prevent us from putting it into all elementary schools?
So we do things in a pilot because we want to make sure that we do it right. And in the beginning, we want to go ahead and include a good number of schools, but not everybody, so that then we can see what is working, what didn't work. Does this meet the needs? Did it give us the information that we need in that with just a few schools instead of kind of trying it out on everybody?
And I would just, to add to that, we want to make sure that when we get this right, that we can move forward with confidence. We feel like with the small group of schools we're looking at, that we'll get what we need to learn, to understand. Having Jonathan and his team engaged, we think is critical, to make sure that when we move forward, we can move forward with confidence. We know that this has been a topic we've been talking about for a long time. We want to make sure we get this right. That's why in our last budgeting cycle, last year's budget, I recommended the dyslexia pilot before moving forward with a full-on screener. And so I'm excited and pleased with the progress that we're making, but I do feel like that's the right way to move forward for something that's this important.
So then, Rob, how long will it take to get to all the schools? Because if you're just piloting, that's 20 schools of kids with dyslexic students who aren't being identified.
So I would say that the timeline we have is pilot this year. The things that we learn from that, then we would go forwards with full implementation next year. Right. I believe that would be the timeline, unless something horribly happens with the pilot, where we have to sit back and take another look. If things go well, I would imagine that we would be able to fully implement next year. I didn't know, Dr. Crespo, do you have anything to add to that?
I would just add that we are certainly monitoring those buildings that don't have the pilot to make sure that any student that shows any dyslexia tendencies, that we're making sure we're addressing that right away. We're not gonna disregard the other 20 buildings as we focus on this pilot. We've had a lot of interest from principals and staff around being involved in part of this process. And I would also say that one of the benefits at the state level is that all of the state schools, all of us are talking together on a regular basis about how do we meet those needs quickly for students as we're going through pilots or programming or assessments. So I don't know that answers your question, but certainly part of the process is looking at those other buildings.
Yeah, I just know that the screener we had been using, the iReady, isn't really for that purpose. So if that's what we're using in those other 20 schools, I'm not sure that that's any better. But I'm encouraged to hear we're only talking about a year before we get to the rest of the schools. So, okay, thanks.
Okay, other questions, board members? Richard?
If you look at that slide, recommendations for pilot, and you're looking at the Mississippi Dyslexia Screener, and it's no financial cost, and it's free? You're saying it's free? So does that mean that parents can go in there and get that and do it themselves? Yes.
They can right now, yes.
Thank you. How do you sign up?
Yeah, it's very, very simple. Just get online and Google Mississippi Dyslexia Screener.
And if a parent did it, if the family did it at home, let's say, how would that then be transferred to the school? Would you be able to utilize their information?
So if they brought the report in, right, I think that we could. However, I'm going to say that I strongly don't recommend that parents give the screener at home. That I should say I don't recommend that we rely on just that and not have a screener within our system. Just because I firmly believe that we can do it really, really well. And yes, I'm not saying that parents cannot do it well at home. However, if we have a system in place, then we can address the needs a little bit better.
Thanks.
Okay. Kathy?
What are we doing to identify students who are in the upper grades that may have dyslexia and haven't been diagnosed? Is there anything in place to catch those students?
So they are not part of the screener. However, what we have in place right now for students in those upper grades is when they are showing that they are struggling with reading, whether it's dyslexia or some other reason, we are providing intervention services, whether that is within the classroom or outside of the classroom. And we have a variety of different intervention services that meet the needs of those students, one of them being an Orton-Gillingham-based intervention.
And then you identified that there might be students who have, don't remember your exact words, but they have not only dyslexia, but a double
deficit.
Double deficit. And I would think there's a different solution for the second deficit. And I'm just curious what we're doing to address that.
So basically, when students have that double deficit, it just means that it's going to take longer to remediate them. They are not going to pick up on the instruction as quickly. We say that for most kids, they need about maybe 5 to 15 repetitions or introductions of a concept in order to really get it solidified in their brain. Kids with dyslexia may need 5 to 50, and kids with the double deficit may need 50 to 500 or 5,000. So it just takes a little bit longer. That's why it's important to know.
But it's the same intervention, just done more? Or are there different interventions too, depending on what the double deficit is?
So there are not interventions specifically for the double deficit. They have, researchers are looking at that, and there is nothing that can train working memory or processing speed. There's nothing that can make it faster for students yet.
Okay.
Aren't there accommodations that can be made in the classrooms to help those students who have slow processing speeds?
Yep.
I mean, I get that it might not speed it up, but you can certainly help the student succeed in a classroom when it's not just a dyslexia issue.
Yes, and accommodations are really, really important in order to level the playing field for these kids. You either give them extended time because they can figure out the words, they just need more time to do it, or oral presentation of text as well as assessments. So those are the two biggest accommodations.
Thank you.
Did you have another?
Just another follow-up question. The screener, is it also, because I saw that you said that, on your PowerPoint, dual language schools would be included too. Mm-hmm. Is that screener in the native language of the child, or?
It is not in the native language of the child. However, a really good screener will account for the fact that these kids do not speak English because it is looking at those underlying language issues. And so typically, it's interesting, when you look at the research along screeners, most often we talk about how students who are not native speakers of English get over-identified, right, for special ed services and for intervention. In the area of dyslexia, they actually get under-identified because they're often left out of the screener. And so with that screener, what we would do then is just really, again, look deeper once we look and we say, do they possibly have the characteristics of dyslexia from this screener? Is it because of their language, or is it because they truly have these characteristics?
Good. Sam?
Thank you for the presentation and for all your work. In your preliminary feedback from administrators, they identify impact on interventions. Is that because the screener will pick up more kids who need interventions and the interventionists are already spread too thin, or what is that? Can you say more about that feedback?
Sure. So in just talking with them, the question is, so then we find out that all of these children may have dyslexic characteristics. What do we do? And so I console them basically to say, we're already doing a lot of what we need to do by having that foundations in universal and then having those Orton-Gillingham interventions already in place. And so that, waylays their fears pretty quickly.
And just one other point on that, if we do the proper design, study design, we'll know and understand if our resources that we're providing for schools around intervention are insufficient or not, and then we can look at that as a budget priority as we move forward. Right. So.
Thanks.
All right. Donna?
Thank you also for all your work and appreciate the time to inform us. On the accommodations, do they have to be special ed identified in order to receive the accommodations?
No, they do not. So you can have a special ed identification, right? And then accommodations can be built into that IEP. However, you can also go the route of having a 504 plan, which is a different federal law that just gives the accommodations.
But the parents would have to seek that 504 or the IEP in order to implement or use the accommodations, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
I just want to take a quick second to say thank you to the BVKid partnership, Michelle and her team, the principals who have jumped all over this as we've tried to get this pilot going. So thank you for that little commercial break.
All right.
Thanks.
Well, thank you for your work. Okay. Does anyone need a quick break, or are we set to carry on? You want a quick break? Okay. Okay. So let's be back in 5 to 6 minutes. All right. We will continue our meeting. Thanks for hanging in there with us. Our next item is number 7, action items consent grouping. I'll read them off. 7.1 personnel items, 7.2 approval of minutes October 8th, 2019 special meeting, 7.3 approval of minutes October 8th, 2019 regular meeting, 7.4 approval of minutes October 15th, 2019 special meeting, 7.5 acceptance of donation Fairview High School, 7.6 acceptance of donation Lafayette Elementary, 7.7 approve amended Newsella contract for all contents areas grades 3 through 12, 7.8 cancellation of November 26, 2019 regular meeting, 7.9 closeout to the construction manager general contractor contract for bond funded work at Cole Elementary. All right, so would anyone like to pull any of these items? Donna, you don't want to pull 7.8?
I thought about it.
Okay, all right. Do we have a motion to approve these items? All right, by Richard and seconded by Kitty. Any questions or clarification? Kathy?
I just don't know what Newsella is. Just wondering if you could tell, we're expanding it? Sorry. You should. You could answer from back there too, Margaret.
Hi again. So Newsella, this is the most I've talked to the board. I'm super excited to be here tonight. So Newsella is an online resource that takes current events and provides leveled reading for students based on their age-appropriate reading level. The benefit of it is that students in a classroom who may not be at the same grade level as their neighbor are able to access text at the appropriate level and still get the information they need. And it has questions and summaries and assessments. It's huge.
Where does it get its news from?
A variety, nice question, a variety of news sources, and they really do quite a bit across the spectrum. It's not just current events in terms of specific topic areas, it's anything, science, technology, social studies, anything, and they work very hard to bring a variety so that students are getting a very balanced approach to whatever their theme is aligned to literacy and content.
That sounds pretty cool. I just didn't know what it was. Thanks.
Yeah, it's really a great product. As a parent, as an administrator, it's great. Okay, I'm walking back over there.
All right. Any other questions? Laura, would you mind calling the roll or calling the vote?
Benford,
Yes.
Fuqua,
Yes.
Garcia,
Yes.
Gebhardt. Yes. Marquis,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sargent.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, moving on to number 8, action items. Our first action item is 8.1, approval of mental health partners service agreement with Halcyon School. All right. First, we have a motion to approve. Okay, so moved by Kitty, seconded by Richard. And now any discussion or questions on this contract? I just want to point out I'm personally appreciative that we're moving to a service agreement format for this. So thank you. Any other questions? Well, great. Laura, would you like to call the roll?
Benford,
Yes.
Fuqua,
Yes.
Garcia,
Yes.
Gebhardt,
Yes.
Marquis,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sargent.
Yes.
All right.
Motion passes.
Our next item is 8.2, update to the Board of Education regarding Sanitas Academy Charter School. So this is, we had an update earlier in our work session about the progress at Sanitas Academy, which was named Summit Academy when the application was first approved, I think 2 years or 1.5 years ago. So the last extension we extended was 6 months ago, and that extension is coming up on October 31st. So this is the time where we revisit that structure and decide how to move forward. So that's what we're doing. Kathleen and Rob, would you like to add anything?
Add anything. I think you've accurately summarized. And in the agenda, we've provided both the last resolution that this board adopted in 2018, as well as the update from the Sanitas Academy team that includes their specific request. So those are the materials that we have.
Okay, so what our job is to do tonight is to come up with another resolution that talks about extending the timeline or the runway for Sanitas and a couple of comments. So, and we anticipated this. So we have a resolution in front of us, and I think we're calling it, is that resolution in the notes, or is that just?
Apologies. So the draft language that has been put together, the resolutions themselves, since they're just drafts based on our prior work and the update, that was not attached in board docs, but we do have some draft language for the board to consider tonight.
Okay, so, because that just clarifies it, I can't point to anything therefore. But I would like to move that, well, I don't know if I can move this yet, right? That we go with a resolution that extends the runway to March 1st. And should I read this? Is that what I should do? Yeah, I think it's the letter C, right? Yeah, although I don't have a C on mine. Is this the right one?
I see. I would be very happy to provide you one that is labeled in the same way that I did label them for the board for reference.
That would be, oh, here we go. Is this the same one?
It's
Okay.
the last one
Can I use this one?
in the
All
packet
right.
of materials that was provided.
So I'm going to read this resolution, and then we'll see if there are any modifications board members would like to make, okay? Does that sound okay with everybody? All right, so this would be Boulder Valley School District RE2 Resolution Number 1934. Approval of the Summit Board's application to start a new high school program, whereas on April 24th, 2018, the Board of Education of Boulder Valley School District approved Resolution Number 1815, which provided conditional approval of the Summit Board's application to expand Summit Middle School's program to include the Summit Academy High School program. Whereas the board adopted a series of resolutions, most recently Resolution 1912, extending the deadline to negotiate and approve revisions to the existing charter contract with Summit Middle Charter School to October 31st, 2019. Whereas Summit Academy desires to proceed with a high school program to be named Sanitas Academy, selected both to recognize the distinctly local nature of the school and also to acknowledge the Latin root of Sanitas as a commitment to promote health in mind and body. Whereas Sanitas Academy has presented specific plans to create a truly diverse by design charter school that will welcome all students, embody the diversity of our community, and prepare students to pursue their dreams and make contributions in a cohesive and connected participatory democracy. Whereas Sanitas Academy has aligned its work with the school district's strategic plan, including the identified priority of closing outcomes and opportunity gaps in our community across demographic and income lines. Whereas Sanitas Academy has made extensive efforts to identify a suitable and affordable facility for a multi-year commitment. Whereas the board approves the creation of Sanitas Academy and directs as follows. So this is a part that's different. By November 15th, Sanitas Academy shall provide a detailed explanation of how their current proposal is different from the charter school application previously considered by the board. This resolution is premised on the board's understanding that the current proposal is in all legal and educational respects the same as the application the board approved in 2018. The board understands the proposal might have a revised governance structure, operating as a charter school network, with Sanitas Academy being identified as a separate school in contract from Summit Middle, but with both under one governing board. So that's a significant change that we would like to understand more about by the date that we're putting out here. Again, that date is November 15th. The next is by January 15th, 2020, the school district and Sanitas Academy must negotiate a new contract separate from Summit Middle. That must include, now separate from Summit Middle, assuming it is separate from Summit Middle, so I don't think that's 100% clear yet. By March 1st, after a reasonable opportunity to offer students the ability to enroll through the school district's open enrollment policy, the charter board will provide evidence of enrollment targeting 100 incoming 9th grade students. If Sanitas Academy does not have 100 enrolled students in year one, Sanitas Academy may proceed to open with an adjusted budget or to terminate its charter contract with the school district. Sanitas Academy shall not request additional funding from the school district to subsidize lower enrollment in Sanitas. By March 1st, the charter board will provide evidence, for example, signed lease, lease purchase, or purchase agreement. It has secured an adequate school site and facility that will be available for occupancy by the Sanitas Academy for grades 9 through 12 by August 1st. The board, and this is important, directs the school district to review its facility use plans and determine in good faith whether suitable space exists to house Sanitas Academy for up to 2 years. By June 1st at 3 p.m., the charter board will submit evidence to the board that all the conditions have been satisfied in order to assure that the charter expansion complies with law and will be successful. Lastly, if any of these terms are not met, then Sanitas Academy agrees to voluntarily refrain from opening in the fall of 2020. All right, so that's what this resolution says. And there are other options, and I would like to know if board members want to make changes, if they have comments or questions. Oh, yeah, I move to approve this. Second, okay, by Kitty. All right. Kathy.
So I have some questions. One of my questions is, an integral part of this process to me is having the feedback and review by our DAC. And since this is potentially a different structure with different numbers and things that the DAC has seen, I'm just wondering how we include the DAC review and feedback in this process.
So I think that if the effort is to make sure that DAC has an opportunity to comment on any changes that may be reflected in this proposal from the application, then I think that the November 15th document that is identified in this resolution that Sanitas would provide to help the board understand if there are significant changes from the application, that might be the right time to engage DAC.
Is there a DAC meeting after November 15th before the contract deadline of January 15th? Because I'm wondering if there is one in December. Is there a December DAC meeting?
I believe there's one on the first Tuesday of December, but that's also the seating of the new board.
Okay. And what I would say about that January 15th date is that was a date that was inserted for purposes of drafting and to give the board something to consider. That date is not the date that Sanitas asked for in the work session, and that date is something that the board could change if the board wanted to do so. If you wanted to allow more time for DAC to review and the contract to be negotiated, then I would suggest that January 15th 15th date is one that you might want to shift.
I was concerned about that date as well because we have holidays and a lot of work to be done between now and then. So we would have to amend the motion if we were going to change that date.
Can you remind me what the date is that was requested by Sanitas Academy?
I believe the date was March 1 for contract negotiations.
Okay.
And you can speak out loud so I can hear you. I don't read lips. Right. I believe that's what you had in your slides. Okay.
So, can I?
No, go ahead.
So we are not bound by what's in this resolution for what we would ask for in contract negotiations.
That's correct. So this resolution directs sorry, I'm just double checking the language. So the first bullet point on this resolution that talks about an explanation comparing the proposal to the application is by November 15th. And then if you look at the next bullet, by January 15th, 2020, negotiating a contract that must include, that's where the board has included directives around negotiation of the enrollment and facility issues that were in the original 1815 resolution. Does that answer your question?
No, because there's other issues in the contract negotiation that I think would be critical for me to approve a contract, including the special education insurance, some of the numbers that they're targeting. There's, you know, the governance issues are still open, and that doesn't address governance. So I don't want to be constrained by the language in this resolution to
Oh, I
say
see your question.
you can't negotiate that because it wasn't in the resolution when it's an integral part to the contract.
Right. I'm sorry. I do now understand your question.
Sorry, it's probably poorly phrased.
So the resolution sets the groundwork by requiring that the district's negotiating team specifically address in the way that the board has outlined the bullets in the resolution. But the entire contract still needs to be negotiated. We would need to have an understanding of what's important to the board that goes into that contract. That's an additional conversation that we could have as your staff. You can give us directions for negotiations, and then the entire contract would still then have to be voted on by this board.
So we're not limited to what's in the resolution.
That's correct.
And then what happens if, unfortunately, we don't reach contract terms? What's the resolution process for that?
The way that the charter school contemplates negotiations will go is that eventually, if there's been an approval and there are contract negotiations, that we should get to a complete contract. If there is not mutual agreement, then the section of statute that talks about contracts suggests that it would be the board putting in place unilateral conditions as part of the contract that then could be challenged by the charter. But it gets us into the, I believe it's section 107.5 of the law.
And isn't there a mediation requirement as opposed to a direct appeal to the state board? Or I think it's a different process, isn't it?
It is a more intensive process. So if conditions are included in the contract, and then those conditions are not followed, instead of being treated as a precursor to the existence of the charter, it's treated as more of a breach of contract. So there is a notice, there is an obligation to engage, and the other distinguishing piece, if I'm not buried in paper, is that there is ultimately a mediation provision if there isn't agreement about what's happened on that provision.
And is it important, my understanding is we haven't seen a budget for a very long time. Would it be important that an updated budget be included as part of this resolution, or is that part of the contract negotiation? And when would we be able to see a budget? I think that would be an important piece to understanding how this is going forward.
So when you look at the resolution currently being discussed, that first bullet that talks about, please tell us what's different between the proposal and the application, that's a request by this board to get some additional information. So if there is an issue around budget and the board would like to see that updated budget early, then I believe it could go in that section of the resolution if you wanted to amend it to include and an updated budget.
So 2 possible amendments already.
It's okay, we're good. We can handle that.
So do we have to amend it to include budget, or can we just say that?
That's what I was wondering, because it says if it's different, then bring it up. If it's the same, we'll just assume it was the same as in the original application, right?
That's what I would.
True. And the budget's part of that original
Right,
application.
because there was a budget in the original application. So if it has changed, then we would probably need to see how it's changed.
Yes, thank you. I think that's an excellent point, that it really, if the budget itself is part of the original application and we're asking for an update, I do think the language is sufficient to address that.
And I just want to make it perfectly clear to whoever's listening to this that the district has looked at space, and currently we have no space that we would be able to offer for this charter school. Currently, I understand that we will take a second look, but I just don't want there to be any misperceptions or miscommunication around that, because I got the strong feeling in the work session that that is what they're hoping for, and I don't want to have misplaced expectations around the facility issue.
Okay, other board members? Donna?
I just have a basic question. I'm sure a lot of us are lost in legal jargon, so I'm just going to, mine's a simple one. If that second bullet is by January 15th, 2020, and we were to change that, do any of these other dates need to change as we go down there? Then everything's March 1st. If I look down that list, except for the June 1st one. And then there's a second one that's by March 1st, and then the other one by March 1st. So is everything due on March 1st?
If the January 15th date that you mentioned is changed to March 1st, then they all become March 1st dates. That's true. And what was requested in the update that was really the basis for trying to put together some draft language was a March date on enrollment and facility. So tonight in the work session was the first time that I had heard the request for a March 1st date for contract negotiations.
Is that going to be an issue for the school to enroll children without having a contract? I mean, should we maybe shoot for, February 15th on the contract, or does it not really matter?
No, I think it makes sense. If we're going to say that the contract will include these other requirements with dates, then I think the contract should be done before those requirements are also due. So, fortunately, we tried to put them at the very beginning of each paragraph so they'd be easy to revise, which I think it would be, but I do think that that's an important practical issue. If it's October, I certainly understand the difficulty of trying to negotiate a contract in the next 9 or 10 days. I'm not sure that it should take another 5 months.
Comments? Sam or Shelley, questions? Oh, yeah, Kitty.
Did we want to consider revising the target number of incoming 9th graders? Because I know we talked about that in the work session.
It's in there. It's in there. It says.
It says targeting 100.
Or they may proceed.
Oh, never mind. Never mind, sorry.
Okay. Yes, Kathy.
I'm just continue to be concerned about the lack of timeliness, and that our council, who's been meeting with these representatives, just found out today that there's a difference in the contract. I mean, at a work session, that's we have to have better communication and better attention to detail and better attention to contract and deadlines, because I feel like we're working really hard to try to accommodate these emergency deadlines that weren't created by us. So we had to meet emergency last week on a application for a grant. We're having to meet tonight. We're finding out things at the last minute. So I would just encourage that as we go forward that we try to limit those, because they're very stressful for all parties that are involved.
Okay. Other board members? All right. Yes.
I just also really hope, as everyone knows, our goal is to try and close the achievement gap. And I just want to make sure that whatever new school we approve or don't approve has a serious research-based effort towards closing that achievement gap, and that some of the things I heard in the work session about having to change, the target is the district average. I understand maybe why that's the district average, but comments about having to change program if they have more FRL or SPED kids was concerning to me, because I think what we all need to be focusing on is how this school will help our district close the achievement gap, because I think that's all of our number one goal.
Okay, other comments? All right. So I have another process question, Kathleen. So we heard from Sanitas Academy today, and there's a little bit of new information, some, it's mostly what came in a memo on Friday. But that didn't give us time to have a discussion about this resolution. So what we're doing to some extent is doing a unilateral resolution, and we don't really have the capacity in a board meeting to check in, with Emily and say, hey, is this going to work for your team? So one option we have is to say, this is what we're going to move forward with, and then send it back, and then have a special meeting next Tuesday to drive Kathy crazy. And I'm wondering if we need to do that, or you think we can proceed with this? Because I feel a little funny sort of approving this, signing off on it, and then finding out that, oh yeah, we actually hate those dates. What we really wanted was March 20th, and
For the record, I won't be going crazy. I
know
want
you
to make
won't go
sure it's a fair
crazy.
process.
So what is your counsel in this situation?
I do love to spend time with the board, and if you think a meeting on Tuesday is necessary, then my favorite pitcher pitched tonight for the World Series, so that's okay with me. He's doing really well, by the way. Okay.
Baseball game, right?
It is. Yeah, the World Series is baseball. National pastime. Okay. But I do... Sorry. Emily and I are learning sign language across the room. You can tell I just provided to her so she could follow the board's discussion,
Right.
the draft resolution that's being discussed. If the concern is this going to work, especially the dates, I think we could probably get to an answer on that by allowing a response on the dates. I'm getting a thumbs up. I think we're okay on the dates.
Okay.
That's what I was going to suggest.
So we need a different date than January 15th. I think that's the open question. And I don't think it should be March 1st because of what you raised, Tina. So sometime in February, since January's out.
So should we just go with mid-February?
Should we look at when we might have a board meeting?
Oh, that's probably a good point.
That's a Friday.
We can all get our pink scarves.
I think we have a board meeting, yes, we do, on February 11th.
Okay. Should we go with February 11th on that one?
February 11th? Or we also have a board meeting on the 18th.
I would use the 18th.
The 18th?
I would use
Okay.
the latter date, yes.
Okay. So do we have a thumbs up on that? Because I'll make a motion to amend.
May I have a moment to confer?
Of course.
I mean, if we can take 60 seconds here and avoid an entire additional meeting, is it okay? I know that may, okay, thank you.
Yeah. And we need to talk about how this process works in the future. All right.
So I have a question. Oh, no.
So we were talking about how those dates can work and reminding the board that they did apply for a startup grant, but as we discussed last week as a board, they cannot be awarded or spend any dollars under that grant unless there is a signed contract. So I think there was some clarity. They're working through some clarity on their team about whether or not we could meet an earlier date. And my response is we can always do it earlier, but why don't we just leave the January date? Because that would be the latest that they would want to get it done, because they would need to begin really working with that grant and cannot do it without a contract. So if we leave that original date.
And that gives us time to meet with DAC, because that's important to me.
Right.
If we need to.
And there is a DAC meeting.
There should be a DAC meeting in December 3rd. And there should be one, I think there's one in January as well.
So in order to make sure that we can have a DAC meeting, why don't we just give the latest date as January 31st? And then there's an opportunity for a December or a January DAC conversation. Okay. Okay. All right, so I'm being corrected. The grant can be awarded, it can't be spent.
So I'm fine with January 31st, if that's okay.
So it's in the interest of Sanitas to have a very collaborative and effective negotiation process, because they can't, assuming they're fortunate enough to win the grant, they can't spend until we have a signed contract.
So are we going with January 31st?
Yes, let's go, yes, I would recommend January 31st.
Do you want to do that amendment? All right.
Then I move to amend the resolution, what was the resolution number? 19-34.
Yeah.
Wherever the language is that changes the contract of January 15th, 2020 to January 31st, 2020.
Okay, so first we need to vote on the amendment.
Need a second.
Oh, well, we need a second by Kitty. And we're first going to vote on the amendment, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So Laura, do you mind calling the roll on the amendment to change the date from March 1st to January 31st, 2020?
Actually, it's from January 15th.
Whoops, January 15th.
Okay, so I've got Gephardt as making the motion, Sargent seconding the motion. Benford. Fuqua.
Yes.
Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt.
Yes.
Marquis.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Sargent.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, and if we have no further discussion, we can call the roll on approving the resolution with the amendment. Any other questions or concerns? Laura, would you please call the roll on resolution number 1934?
Benford.
Yes.
Fuqua is not present. Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt.
Yes.
Marquis.
Yes.
Myers. Yes. Sargent.
Okay, everybody hold on to your hat. I'm actually voting yes on this one.
Motion passes.
Okay, one for the history books, Kitty. All right. So our next item is policy study, 9.1, policies IGBA, programs for handicapped students, special education, DJE, purchasing, contracting. All right, Kathleen, do you want to give us a little bit of context about these two? There was some included in our board docs as well.
Yes, so in an effort to move forward on the board's policy work, it's been a very busy couple of weeks, as you might have noticed from all the talking I did earlier and last week. So we just have two policies to bring forward. The first one is our broad policy on serving our students with disabilities. This policy had not been touched since 1972. So even before the law that really dictates how we serve our kids with disabilities hadn't been passed yet at the time we touched this policy. So we brought the policy forward tonight to bring it into the early part of this century. And really, it's just modernization. I think a lot of people, because I know how knowledgeable this board is about special education, this is really a broad, general language policy because the detailed work is really governed by federal law. So this is a aspirational, set the tone for the work that we do.
I was wondering why we didn't include the language of In re Andrew as what the standard is. I think that's still general enough, but we don't have that language in here. We just say they're going to meet standards, but I think if we could, you know what that language is, I could look it up, but the new benchmark from the Supreme Court language, I think we should include in our policy.
Do we include it or do we reference it?
I'm fine either way, but I'd like it included.
Because are we moving away from replicating language that exists in one place? Is that our general?
That's our general practice. I think that Board Member Gephardt's comment goes more to, we really expect that our services for our students who are able to graduate with a general education diploma moves them forward on par with their typical peers. And for our students who are working on alternative standards, we make sure that they have goals and objectives and instruction that's appropriately ambitious for that child. I believe that's the language that she's referencing. And I think it would be fine to have an additional paragraph in this policy that sets forth that language.
Donna?
Thank you.
Just quickly in the last paragraph, to facilitate the delivery of effective programming, the Board of Education encourages the school district to develop. I just want to make it clear that a lot of these our district is doing. I mean, with Leslie Geiser, Anna Stewart's work with the SEAC, and when I read it, I think some people would read it thinking, so we're not doing this, but I just want to point out that we are.
Yes, thank you very much for that. I think this district has amazing staff, including those members that serve our students with disabilities, and they have absolutely been operating a top-notch program, despite the fact that our policy hadn't been updated to capture it. But yes, I know they appreciate that point.
Okay, any other comments or questions? All right, and then our next, anyone questions on DJE? Kitty.
Yes, I was hoping that somewhere in here we could say that we want to consider contractors owned by people of color. I was going to say that. And I don't know where we want to put it. I don't know if we want to say that's, you know, a deal breaker if they're not, because we also are stewards of our taxpayers' money. But I do think it needs to be somewhere that we're going to be seeking out bids from companies owned by people of color.
And I do appreciate that comment. I would, on the policy review schedule with the board, we have committed to a complete review and overhaul of our purchasing and financial policies. I think that will be the appropriate time to really make sure that we look comprehensively and that your policies reflect the values and priorities of the board. This is really intended to be only a minor technical change to make sure that our department can comply with the USDA rules around food purchasing. But I do appreciate that point.
Okay, Kathy?
What I remember from conversations on this point from our prior council is it's not nearly as neat and tidy as just adding that language in, because it carries all sorts of analysis and other requirements that I'm sure will get to be refreshed when we have that conversation.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or concerns? It's just policy study, so if you think of anything in the interim, we won't vote on it for a while. All right, so then our next item is number 10, 10.1, agenda setting. Anyone want to say something about our agenda? We have it, again, just a reminder, as an item to discuss with the new board, how to make sure our agenda setting is going okay, how to improve it. We're not quite following our policy. So we're going to need to look at that policy, look at our process, and see how we make it better. But we're thinking we'll do that with our new board. Richard?
I can't remember whether it was last board meeting or the meeting before that, but we were talking about the reading to end racism.
Yes.
And I did do an RFI, and I believe you all read the RFI, and it's not an adopted school district program. I'm wondering if we're going to ever have a chance to talk about that and seeing if we can't get that at least to be considered as an adopted school district program.
Do we need to do another RFI that talks about what that really means? And we have a ton of programs that we as a board don't vote on or take opinions on, so I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I think that Richard, you and I can touch base on kind of this idea of what adopted means. Does that mean that every school has to implement it? Does that mean it's on a list of things that schools can choose from? Let's have some more conversation on that. In the meantime, we're doing a huge initiative inventory, as I've shared with the board, of 260 initiatives where we're actually kind of looking at whether those are being impactful or not. But let's think about what officially adopted might mean. I don't know that that's defined in policy or if that's in practice. And so I think that we can touch base offline and kind of figure that out.
I think that's a really interesting question too, because I don't really know what that would mean. So, any other items or thoughts? And just a reminder, Shelley, Sam left, but Shelley and Sam will be here, I think, for one more meeting. And December 3rd will be a time that we can honor Shelley and Sam. We'll have a reception, and then we'll seat the two new board members. Do I have that? December 3rd. Is that right?
December 3rd.
Yeah. So it's a pretty big change. All right. So
we
with
don't
that,
have to write them any more paychecks.
Yeah, exactly.